What happens when Hollywood's most beloved star walks into a talk show expecting warmth, and instead finds herself cornered by a question she never saw coming? Before we dive into the moment that made the entire studio gasp, smash that like button, subscribe to Stage View, and drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from. Now, let's step into the room where everything changed. It started like any other morning at The View. Cameras gliding across the bright studio, the early buzz of the live audience settling into their seats, and that familiar mix of anticipation and slight chaos that always swirled before the hosts went live. Sandra Bullock, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that balanced elegance with quiet authority, waited backstage. She had done this dance for decades: smile, breathe, answer questions, promote the film, shake hands, walk out. Easy, predictable, controlled. But today, something felt different. She sensed at the moment a stagehand brushed past her with a whispered, "Good luck today," in a tone that felt less like casual politeness and more like a warning. And when she stepped closer to the curtain, she heard Sunny Hostin's voice drifting through the studio like a scalpel, sharp, direct, cutting through the warm laughter of the crowd. "I'm just saying, if we're going to talk about accountability in Hollywood, then we need to be honest about everyone, not just the usual names." A ripple of murmurs moved through the audience. Sandra felt a chill push down her spine. She'd been prepped for a standard interview, a conversation about her new project, a few jokes about her career. Nothing more. But Sunny's tone, that wasn't casual discussion. That was the voice of someone loading ammunition. The stage manager signaled her, "You're up." And just like that, Sandra Bullock stepped onto the set of The View. The audience erupted, cheers, claps, whistles. Sandra flashed her famous bright smile, letting the applause wash over her like armor. She waved, took her seat between Whoopi Goldberg and Sunny Hostin, and adjusted her mic. Whoopi leaned in first, voice calm but tinged with that knowing humor. "Sandra, we are so happy to have you back. It's been too long." Sandra exhaled, relieved. "A friendly start. I missed you guys. It's always good chaos being here." The audience laughed, but Sunny didn't smile. Her posture was rigid, her expression unreadable. She didn't clap with the others. Instead, she tapped a pen against her note card slowly, rhythmically, waiting for the laughter to settle. Then she struck. "So, Sandra," she began, her voice smooth, almost too controlled. "Before we get into your movie, we need to address something that's been circulating for a while now." Sandra blinked, her smile freezing at the edges. "Oh!" The studio shifted. Even the air seemed to tighten. Sunny continued, "There have been conversations, very serious conversations, about the way Hollywood has handled certain narratives, particularly involving real-life tragedies and public perception. And your name has come up quite a bit." A low murmur spread across the audience, surprise, confusion. Whoopi shot Sunny a slow sideways look, the kind she used whenever things were about to go off script. Sandra's throat tightened. She tried to keep her voice steady. "I'm not sure what you mean." Sunny leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You've profited from roles that some people feel romanticized, or even distorted complicated real-life events. And in light of recent updates, some are calling those portrayals irresponsible." The room went dead silent. Sandra swallowed. She knew exactly what Sunny was referencing. A recent wave of social media discourse had resurfaced around The Blind Side, a film she had starred in years ago. Now under new scrutiny as the real-life family involved faced accusations and legal battles. Online critics were pointing fingers, not just at the story, but at her. She had hoped the issue wouldn't follow her here. She was wrong. The audience shifted uncomfortably. A few people gasped softly. A couple whispered. Sandra felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept her tone measured. "Sunny, I understand the conversations happening. I've seen them, but I didn't write the story. I portrayed a character based on the information we were all given at the time." And Sunny cut her off. "But do you feel any responsibility for how that narrative shaped public perception? Especially now that we know parts of it might not have been accurate." Whoopi stepped in, lifting a hand. "Sunny." But Sunny wasn't finished. I'm just asking the question people want answered. Sandra inhaled deeply. Her fingers curled under the edge of the table. Subtle, almost invisible to the camera, but a telltale sign that she was grounding herself. She hated confrontations like this. Not because she felt guilty, but because she knew how a single moment, taken out of context, could ignite a wildfire online. She met Sunny's gaze. I've always taken my work seriously, but I can't control real-life developments years after a film is made. I'm an actor. I'm not the legal system. I'm not the family involved. I'm not the press. And I won't accept blame for something I had no part in. The firmness in her tone caught the audience off guard. A few clapped. Sunny didn't. So you're saying you have no regrets? Sunny pressed. No second thoughts about your involvement? Sandra's jaw tightened. Of course I have empathy. How could I not? But regret? No, because my intention was never harm. Sunny leaned back slowly, studying her. Intent doesn't erase impact. A wave of tension rolled visibly across the studio. Whoopi stepped in again. Okay, let's breathe for a second. But the damage was done. The energy had shifted. The conversation had cracked open something raw, something uncomfortable, something that Sandra had tried to avoid for months. And Sunny wasn't backing down. Sandra drew in a shaky breath and looked out at the audience. Faces frozen somewhere between shock and fascination. She knew millions were watching. She knew every word was being clipped, posted, dissected in real time. And she could feel her composure slipping. Still, she lifted her chin. If you want to have this conversation, Sunny, then let's have it fully. Not just the part that makes headlines. A quiet rippled through the audience. Sunny's eyes narrowed just slightly. Whoopi's eyebrows shot up. Joy leaned back in her chair, muttering, "Oh boy." And Sandra Bullock, for the first time in many public interviews, looked ready to fight. For a moment, neither woman spoke. The cameras kept rolling, the audience kept staring, and the tension between Sandra and Sunny thickened like fog settling over a battlefield. It was the kind of silence that made producers in the control room lean closer to their monitors, sensing that something rare, something volatile, was unfolding live. Sunny finally broke the stillness. "All right," she said calmly, folding her hands on the table. "Then let's have the full conversation." Sandra nodded once, her expression steady, but her pulse pounding so hard she felt it in her ears. She wasn't someone who invited confrontation. She avoided it, steered around it, moved through her career with grace and diplomacy. But Sunny had dragged her into a corner, and Sandra was done retreating. Whoopi let out a slow breath, clearly bracing herself. "Ladies, I'm going to remind everyone we're live." The audience laughed nervously. Sunny turned slightly, just enough to face Sandra directly without breaking eye contact. "You say your intention wasn't harmful," she began. "I believe that. But intentions don't erase the consequences when real people feel misrepresented or exploited." Sandra's voice dropped into something lower, more vulnerable but unwavering. "Then ask me what I actually feel, not what social media assumes I feel." Sunny lifted an eyebrow. "All right, what do you feel?" Sandra paused, gathering her thoughts the way an actor steadies herself before a difficult line. She didn't want to fumble. "Not here. I feel heartbroken," she said. "Heartbroken that something meant to inspire and uplift is now the center of so much pain. I feel blindsided too. And I feel trapped between truths that aren't mine to own and accusations that aren't fair." A hush fell over the audience. Even Sunny seemed taken aback, not softened, but momentarily disarmed. "And," Sandra continued, "I feel like I'm being asked to answer for something I had no power over. Like people want an apology that won't fix anything, simply because they need someone to direct their anger at." Sunny leaned forward, her voice firmer. "Sandra, no one is asking you to take legal responsibility. But cultural responsibility? Ethical responsibility? That's different." Sandra's throat tightened. "Understood. But you're treating me like I'm the one who lied. Like I'm the one who manipulated the story. I wasn't involved in the writing, the contracts, the family's decisions, the real-life events. I acted. That's what I do. That's all I did. A few members of the audience nodded, murmuring agreement. But Sunny wasn't done. You weren't just acting, Sunny countered. You were the face of that narrative. A narrative people trusted because you were in it. Your presence gave it legitimacy. Sandra froze. She knew Sunny was good at her job, but this was sharper, deeper, and more deliberate than she expected. Whoopi interjected quickly. Sunny, we're not putting the downfall of an entire situation on Sandra. Let's be real. But Sunny raised a hand slightly, not disrespectfully, but firmly. I'm not blaming her. I'm asking her to acknowledge the impact of her influence. Sandra inhaled slowly. I've spent my whole career trying to do right by stories, by people, by audiences. And I'll acknowledge the impact. But I won't carry the weight of something I didn't create. Sunny smirked, not mocking, but almost like she had predicted that response. So you're saying you don't believe actors have any responsibility for the messages their films send? The way she phrased it made Sandra's chest tighten. It was a trap, a carefully crafted one. Sandra met her eyes. I believe in responsibility, but I don't believe in scapegoating. A wave of hum rose from the audience. Sunny shifted in her chair. You call it scapegoating. Others call it accountability. And others, Sandra fired back, call it opportunistic outrage. The studio erupted. Gasps, shouts, applause, disbelief. Sunny's eyes flashed, a controlled spark of anger breaking through her calm exterior. Opportunistic outrage? She echoed, her voice carrying a chill. Are you saying that people affected by the real situation are just, looking for attention? No, Sandra replied instantly. I'm saying some people who weren't affected at all are using this moment to stir chaos online and point fingers at whoever is easiest. It's not fair to the real victims. It's not fair to me. And it's not fair to the truth. Sunny leaned in so close the edge of the table creaked. Sandra, with respect. This doesn't feel respectful, Sandra whispered sharply. The audience gasped again. Sunny paused. For a split second, a flicker of regret, or maybe recognition, crossed her face. But she pressed on. I'm doing my job, she said. Sandra's eyes glimmered with something heavy, tiredness maybe, or years of unspoken frustrations rising to the surface. And I'm trying to be honest. Even though I know no matter what I say, someone will twist it. Whoopi finally stepped in with authority. Okay, time out. We need to breathe. Everybody. In out, before this becomes something it doesn't need to be. Joy added, this is why we need wine at the table. Laughter broke the tension, but the air didn't fully relax. Sunny sat back, slowly releasing a breath. Sandra, look. I respect you. I do. But I think it's important for public figures to understand the influence they carry, especially when it comes to real stories involving real lives. Sandra nodded. I understand influence. What I don't understand is why I'm being put on trial for something that changed long after the film was made. Sunny's tone softened just slightly. Because you're the one people recognize. The one they associate with the story. Sandra closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of that settle. She whispered, that's the problem. A quiet ripple passed through the audience, sad, empathetic. Whoopi leaned a little closer to Sandra. Do you feel like you're being blamed because you're the most visible person connected to it? Sandra answered without hesitation. Yes. I feel like the world is angry, and they decided I'm easier to reach than the people actually involved. Sunny opened her mouth, but Sandra raised her hand. Gently, not dismissively, but firmly enough to signal that she needed to finish. I've done hundreds of interviews over the years, she said, her voice steadier. I've answered tough questions. I've been vulnerable. I've been open. But I'm tired of being expected to apologize for things outside my control simply because I'm a recognizable face. A hush fell again. Sunny's expression shifted, still intense, but less confrontational, more contemplative now. Sandra, I hear what you're saying. Sandra nodded, letting the moment breathe. But, Sunny added softly, people also want to hear what you've learned. Sandra blinked. Learn. Sunny nodded. Yes. From watching this situation unfold, from seeing how stories can evolve, from understanding how powerful narratives can be. What have you learned from all of this? Sandra inhaled, exhaled, and let her shoulders relax just a fraction. What had she learned? She looked down at her hands, then up again. That sometimes, she said slowly, you can give your whole heart to something and still end up being held accountable for things beyond your reach. Sunny listened quietly. And I've learned, Sandra continued, that the world is quick to villainize the wrong people when the truth is uncomfortable. The audience murmured, reacting thoughtfully. But I've also learned, she added, her tone softening, that staying silent when you're hurting only makes it worse. So I'm here, saying it out loud. Sunny didn't speak. She just watched Sandra, as though seeing a deeper layer she hadn't expected. Then Whoopi finally exhaled, breaking the spell. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're actually going to talk about Sandra's new movie, which is what she came here for. Laughter. Relief. The tension loosened as the cameras faded to commercial. But off camera, nothing was over. Sandra pulled back from the table slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her mic pack. She didn't look at Sunny. She couldn't. Not yet. Sunny stood, stretching her legs. She hesitated, then said quietly, Sandra. Sandra froze. Sunny's voice softened even more. I didn't mean to blindside you. Sandra turned, meeting her eyes. Sunny added, but people wanted those questions asked. Sandra whispered, but did they want them asked like that? Sunny didn't answer. Instead, she looked away, guilt flickering across her features before she steadied herself again. Producers called 5 minutes to return. The audience buzzed with whispers. Sandra took a slow breath, preparing to plaster on a smile for the next segment. But deep inside, the storm was far from over. The studio countdown began. Back in 5, 4, 3. The audience quieted, hosts straightened their posture, and the red on-air light blinked back to life. Sandra inhaled deeply as Whoopi took the lead, smiling brightly into the camera. We are back with the incredible Sandra Bullock, she announced, sprinkling warmth back into the atmosphere like a soft blanket after a storm. And now, we're finally going to talk about her new film. Applause filled the air again, but it felt different. Thinner, more cautious, like the audience was clapping with one eye open, still wary after what they'd just witnessed. Sandra put on a gentle smile, though the sting from the earlier confrontation still throbbed in her chest. She'd done live shows long enough to know how to shift moods. But this one felt heavier, like pushing a stalled car uphill. Joy Behar jumped in quickly, trying to lighten the moment. Sandra, I watched the movie last night. I gotta say, you had me texting my therapist afterward. Laughter echoed, genuine this time. Sandra placed a hand over her heart dramatically. Then my work here is done. More laughter. But even as she spoke, she could feel Sunny's presence beside her, a quiet, simmering pressure. They hadn't resolved anything. A temporary truce lingered, but the fire beneath it hadn't cooled. Sandra wasn't sure if it would. The conversation moved forward. The film's themes, the directing process, a funny story about a night shoot that involved a malfunctioning prop and unexpected raccoon cameo. The audience laughed at all the right times. Cameras glided smoothly. On the surface, everything appeared normal again. But inside Sandra's mind, a relentless replay looped, Sunny's words. Her own. The sharpness of it all. She could sense Sunny's silence too. Not disinterested, not disengaged, but calculating, choosing her next move. And then it came. So, Sunny said suddenly, leaning forward slightly, voice soft but edged with meaning. This film deals a lot with morality and truth, right? Sandra froze internally. She could almost hear a producer in the control room whisper. Oh no, she's going back in. Yes, Sandra said slowly. Those are major themes. Sunny nodded thoughtfully. Do you feel like working on this film, especially now, has changed the way you think about truth when it comes to storytelling? Or responsibility? A subtle shift ran through the audience, barely a gasp, more like a collective tightening of shoulders. Whoopi shot Sunny a warning glance. Sandra held Sunny's gaze, refusing to blink. Truth, she said carefully, is complicated. And storytelling is often about trying to make sense of things that aren't simple. Sunny tilted her head. So, does this film reflect how you see your own situation? Whoopi stepped in quickly. Sunny. But Sandra raised a hand slightly. It's okay, she murmured. The audience inhaled sharply. Then Sandra spoke, voice low but strong. I think this film reflects what I've always believed. That people are quick to judge what they don't understand. And that sometimes those judgments hurt more than the truth ever could. A murmur rolled across the room. Sunny didn't back down. But isn't it fair for people to question things now? To ask hard questions? Yes, Sandra said. Hard questions are fair. But ambushing people with accusations they can't possibly defend isn't fair. There it was. The first real crack in her composure. Sunny's lips parted slightly. Surprised or stung, Sandra couldn't tell. Joy muttered under her breath. Here we go again. Sunny recovered quickly. I didn't ambush you. I asked questions that were relevant. Sandra's tone sharpened. Relevant doesn't always mean appropriate. Whoopi tried again to contain the earthquake. Let's all remember we're on live TV. The audience laughed nervously again. Sunny spoke, quieter now. Sandra, if you feel attacked, that was never my intention. Sandra exhaled slowly. I don't feel attacked. I feel mischaracterized. That word landed like a weight. I've spent years, Sandra continued, working hard, treating people well, trying to bring light into the world. And now suddenly I'm being what? Scolded? Judged? Blamed for something I didn't do. The air thickened again. Sunny looked down briefly, then back up. Her voice softened for the first time. I wasn't judging you. I was holding you to the same standard I'd hold anyone with your platform. Sandra's voice cracked, not with anger this time, but exhaustion. Sunny, you're holding me responsible for real-life events I wasn't part of. Events that changed long after the movie was released. What standard am I supposed to meet, omniscient? A wave of sympathetic laughter rose from the audience. Whoopi added gently, It's hard when the world wants you to be everything. Sandra nodded. Exactly. But Sunny, still thoughtful, still stubborn, asked one more question. So what would you say to the people who are hurt? The people who feel the movie didn't represent them honestly. The room stilled again. Sandra inhaled slowly. I would say, I'm sorry. The audience gasped. Sunny blinked. Whoopi nearly choked on her sip of water. Sandra clarified quickly, voice steady. Not sorry for making the film. Not sorry for portraying a character that was based on what we knew at the time. But sorry that the real situation turned into something painful. Sorry for anyone who feels misled or misrepresented or harmed by something that should have uplifted them. She swallowed hard. But that sorrow isn't guilt. It's empathy. For the first time since the clash began, Sunny's expression shifted. Not satisfaction. Not victory. Something else. Something almost like understanding. Before she could respond, the producers signaled for a final segment. Whoopi wrapped it up with practiced ease. And on that note, we're going to let Sandra breathe a moment. Stick around, we'll be right back. Applause thundered again. The moment the cameras cut to commercial, Sandra exhaled sharply, bowing her head into her hands. She didn't cry. She wouldn't let herself. But she rubbed her forehead as though relieving a pressure that had been building for months. Sunny stared at the table, fingers tapping nervously, a small, vulnerable gesture. Whoopi looked between them and sighed heavily. We need to talk backstage. All of us. Nobody argued. Minutes later, as the show wrapped and the studio emptied, Sandra stood and followed a producer toward the back hallway. The echo of fading applause chased her steps. Under the pulsing fluorescent lights, Sunny approached, hesitant, slower than before. Sandra, she said quietly. Sandra stopped walking. Sunny's voice dropped to a near whisper. I know today got intense. Sandra kept her back turned. Yes, it did. I wasn't trying to make you the villain. Sandra finally turned, her expression calmer, but still wounded. Then what did you think would happen? Sunny hesitated. Sandra continued, quieter. You're good at your job, Sunny. You ask hard questions. You push conversations. I respect that. Truly. But today, it felt personal. And I don't know why. Sunny exhaled slowly. It wasn't personal. It was pressure. People demanding we address certain topics. People expecting me to ask the tough stuff. And maybe I pushed too hard. For the first time, honesty flickered between them. Sandra leaned against the wall, crossing her arms. I'm human too, you know. Not just a face on a poster. Sunny nodded, eyes dropping. I know. A long silence stretched between them. Then Sunny added, If I hurt you, that wasn't my intention. Sandra's voice softened. I know, but you did. Sunny swallowed hard. I'm sorry. Sandra looked at her for a long moment, weighing those words. Then she nodded once. Thank you. Whoopi appeared then, hands on her hips. Okay, you two. Let's breathe. You both said what you needed to say. No more daggers, no more jabs. Today was a lot. Sandra managed a small, weary smile. That's an understatement. Sunny mirrored it faintly. But the tension wasn't gone, not fully. It had simply cooled into something manageable. Producers called out that press was waiting outside. Publicists were preparing statements. The internet was already on fire. Clips of their confrontation were being uploaded, shared, dissected. And Sandra knew part of her life would never be the same after today. She straightened her shoulders. Sunny did the same. Whoopi placed a hand on both their backs. Let's get through the rest of this day without anybody throwing punches. Sandra let out a soft laugh. No promises. And the three of them walked down the hallway, toward cameras, headlines, and a media storm none of them could fully predict. The hallway leading out of the studio felt unnaturally long. Sandra walked it slowly, each step echoing with the weight of what had just unfolded. Conversations from the set still buzzed faintly behind her. The hurried footsteps of crew members, the sharp whispers of producers, the scrape of chairs being realigned for the next show. But ahead of her silence, a heavy, expectant silence. Her publicist, Amanda, rushed up the moment she stepped through the final door, nearly breathless. Sandra, we need to talk. The clips are everywhere already. Sandra closed her eyes for a brief moment. Of course they are. Amanda held up her tablet. Headlines were already exploding across social platforms. Sandra Bullock confronted live on The View. Sunny Hostin challenges Bullock in tense exchange. Hollywood star breaks silence in heated on-air clash. Audience gasps as interview goes off the rails. And below each headline, millions of comments. Some supportive, some furious, some confused, but all of them watching. Sandra took the tablet and scrolled through the threads, her expression unreadable. She knew this world. She knew how quickly things spread, how fast narratives formed, how ruthlessly the internet judged. But she didn't expect this much intensity. Not this fast. She swallowed hard, handing the tablet back. Let's get to the car. Outside, the moment she pushed through the back exit, a wall of flashing lights hit her like a punch. Paparazzi had swarmed the parking area, shoved behind temporary metal barricades, screaming her name like they were fighting for oxygen. Sandra, do you regret your comments? Did Sunny Hostin ambush you? Are you issuing a formal apology? Is this the beginning of a controversy? Do you blame The View for blindsiding you? Sandra shielded her face with her hand as Amanda guided her firmly toward the waiting SUV. Keep walking, Amanda instructed. Don't respond. But one question pierced through everything else. Do you feel guilty, Sandra? She froze. Just for a second. Because that wasn't a question. It was an accusation wrapped in curiosity. Her jaw tightened. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Not without fueling the fire. Amanda ushered her inside the SUV, slammed the door, and signaled the driver. Tires screeched softly as the vehicle pulled away. Inside, Sandra sank back against the seat, exhaling a breath she had been holding since the moment Sunny asked her that first loaded question. She stared out the window, New York blurring past in a smeared wash of lights, like the city itself was moving too fast for her to catch. Amanda finally spoke. It's going to be a long news cycle. Sandra let out a humorless laugh. You think? Amanda hesitated. We should consider releasing a statement. Sandra shook her head slowly. No, not yet. We need to control the narrative. No, Sandra repeated firmer. If I release something now, it looks defensive. Desperate. And I'm not doing that. Amanda sighed, respecting her decision. So, she said gently, how are you feeling? Sandra didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed locked on the window, watching the city race past, letting her thoughts unravel silently. Finally, she whispered, tired. Amanda nodded. You held your own out there. Most people wouldn't have. But Sandra wasn't thinking about victory. She was thinking about truth. About pressure. About how quickly admiration could morph into scrutiny. And how fragile dignity felt when a million eyes were watching. She closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. I just didn't expect it to get that personal. Amanda nodded again, softer this time. Sunny crossed a line. Maybe, Sandra murmured. Or maybe I'm just exhausted from carrying expectations that were never mine. The SUV rolled on through the city. Meanwhile, on the other side of Manhattan, in the View's green room, Sunny Hostin sat alone at the dressing counter, shoulders slightly slumped, the once confident posture softened by the weight of what had happened. Her reflection stared back at her, sharp, intelligent eyes clouded with something she rarely showed, conflict. Whoopi entered quietly. She closed the door behind her and leaned against the frame, arms folded. Sunny glanced at her, but didn't speak. Whoopi sighed. You pushed hard today. Sunny nodded, swallowing. I know. And you know she didn't deserve the way it came out. Sunny looked down at her hands. I wasn't trying to attack her. I was trying to ask what everyone online keeps screaming at us. I thought, I don't know, maybe the conversation could be meaningful. Whoopi crossed the room, her voice gentler now. You're passionate. Everyone knows that. But sometimes passion hits like a hammer. Sunny's voice lowered. Did I go too far? Whoopi didn't answer immediately. She placed a hand on Sunny's shoulder. You were doing your job. And Sandra handled herself with grace. But next time, maybe ease up on the trigger. Sunny let out a shaky breath. I didn't want to hurt her. I know, Whoopi said softly. But you did. Sunny closed her eyes briefly, a wave of regret washing over her. Do you think she hates me now? Whoopi let out a small chuckle. No. Sandra Bullock doesn't hate people. She just wants fairness. That's it. Sunny nodded, absorbing the words. But outside that room, the world was already choosing sides. Within the hour, hashtags exploded. Hashtag Team Sandra. Hashtag Sunny was right. Hashtag The View Clash. Hashtag Sandra Speaks Out. Talk shows debated it. Radio hosts analyzed it. Podcasts replayed every second. Clips spread like wildfire. Some edited to portray Sandra as defensive, others framing Sunny as aggressive. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. Some voices said, she stood up for herself, finally. Sunny was just doing her job. Sandra deserves better. Actors shouldn't hide from accountability. Meanwhile, reaction videos popped up by the thousands. People rewatching the confrontation, pausing at key moments, breaking down body language, tone, phrasing. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a stance. Everyone wanted to be part of the explosion. Sandra watched from her apartment later that night, sitting alone on the couch with the TV muted. Clips played on loop across every channel. Her face flashing over and over, frozen mid-expression, mid-breath, mid-conflict. She saw the moment her voice cracked. She saw the moment she stood her ground. She saw the moment Sunny cut in, and the moment she fired back. She watched it like an out-of-body experience, as though she were analyzing a stranger. She whispered to herself, is this what they'll remember now? Her phone buzzed constantly, texts from friends, co-stars, journalists, distant acquaintances suddenly resurfacing. Are you okay? Just saw The View, call me. Proud of you for speaking up. Rough day, huh? Trending #1 worldwide. Hang in there. She set her phone down. Silence settled in again. Finally, there was a knock on her door, gentle, hesitant. Amanda poked her head in. You should try to sleep. Sandra shook her head lightly. I don't think I can. Amanda walked over and sat beside her. The world's loud right now, but it'll pass. Sandra gave a small smile. Will it? Amanda placed a hand over hers. Because you didn't lash out. You didn't lie. You didn't fold. You spoke from a place of honesty and hurt. People resonate with that. Sandra exhaled slowly. Do you think Sunny meant to attack me? No, Amanda replied softly. She meant to ask questions. She just didn't consider how human you were in the process. Sandra looked down at her hands. I meant what I said, about empathy. I know. Sandra stared at the TV again. I hope they heard that. They did, Amanda whispered. More than you think. Sandra rested her head back on the couch cushion, the weight of everything slowly starting to settle. Not fully, not comfortably, but enough. Tomorrow, Amanda added gently, we'll figure out our next steps. Sandra nodded. But for now, silence. For now, reflection. For now, letting the storm burn itself out. The world would keep talking. Social media would keep spinning. Editorials would be written. Commentators would debate. But Sandra knew one truth she held onto like a lifeline. She had spoken from the heart. She had stood her ground. She had stayed true to herself. And whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms. Because the world wasn't done with this story. And neither was she. The end. Call to action for your viewers. And now, after watching this entire dramatic unraveling, it's your turn. What do you think about Sandra Bullock's clash with Sunny Hostin? Who was right? Who went too far? And how should moments like this be handled on live television? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one of them. And don't forget to subscribe to Stage View for more explosive, emotional, cinematic deep dives into the most shocking moments from Hollywood and beyond. Your support helps us bring you more powerful storytelling just like this. Hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and stay watching Stage View.